This is South Africa, an incredibly beautiful country located on the southern tip of Africa. Although it has a relatively small population, the culture is extremely rich and very vibrant. Today, looking at this country from the outside, we see a beautiful area that's off the beaten path. But if you decide to dig a little deeper, you will find a dark history filled with pain, suffering, and inequality that will completely reshape the way you look at the world that we live in. This grand story of loss and triumph begins in the lowly village of Mazo, South Africa, in 1918. The hot sun beats the rugged landscape, and the sound of various bugs fill the air. Suddenly, without any sort of warning, a noise starts to be heard. The entire village, entranced by the sound, venture out of their huts to find a small baby cradled in its mother's arms. Little did they know, these villagers were looking into the helpless eyes of their future liberator and president, Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela is someone so incredibly important that it is impossible to detail everything he may have accomplished. So, in an effort to preserve his grandeur and legacy, let's go to where it all started, in that little village of Mazo. After he was born, Nelson Mandela moved to the Transkei region where he grew up. Mandela's childhood is primarily marked by the tribal customs and traditions of the Thembu people, as his father was a chief. After the tragic passing of his father when Mandela was only 9 years old, he was adopted by a very powerful man named Chief Jongintabam, who was the regent of the Thembu tribe. Nelson was able to receive a fantastic education at Clarkbury Boarding Institute and Healdtown Methodist School. Once he graduated, he decided to pursue law at the University of Fort Hare, where he eventually became involved in student politics and was expelled for being involved in a protest. So, at this point in his life, Nelson Mandela is expelled and all alone in South Africa. His next move is to find a new place to live. This comes in the form of Johannesburg, which is one of the biggest cities in the country. Here, he attends the University of South Africa and finally gets his law degree. As he is studying there, though, he begins to witness firsthand the discrimination and oppression faced by black South Africans under the apartheid regime. Wanting to make a real change, Mandela joins the National African Congress, or ANC, which was the leading organization that advocated for the rights of black South Africans. As he struggled against the government, he rose higher and higher in the ranks by leading nonviolent campaigns and protests against discrimination. However, nonviolent protests don't do too well against a government that used violence. So, in 1961, Mandela co-founded a group that translates to Spear of the Nation. This group was an armed group that launched sabotage campaigns against government targets. As you can imagine, the government of South Africa did not really like this, so, in 1962, they sentenced Mandela to 5 years in prison. His original imprisonment was because of incitement and leaving the country illegally, but later he was pressed for more serious charges. In 1964, 2 years after he was originally imprisoned, Mandela was sentenced to life imprisonment for sabotage and conspiracy to overthrow the government. For the next 27 years of his life, Nelson suffered in a prison on Robben Island, becoming an iconic symbol of the anti-apartheid movement and an international figure of resisting oppression. You see, thanks to Mandela's work, the word about anti-apartheid was out. People all across the world were starting to protest this horrible injustice and Nelson's unlawful imprisonment. Despite his capture, Mandela remained very steadfast in his commitment to justice and reconciliation. During the infamous Rivonia trial, he is quoted saying, "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and achieve. But, if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." This incredible quote showed that no matter what, Nelson Mandela was willing to risk everything, including his life, to achieve freedom and equality for all. Throughout his imprisonment on Robben Island, a change started to happen. People had been protesting against apartheid for quite some time now, but finally they realized that Nelson Mandela was the key to ending it. Individuals and groups all across the world began protests and even riots that demanded his release. Finally, in mid-1990, it eventually happened. President F.W. de Klerk released Nelson Mandela from prison, signaling the end of apartheid. The one thing that he fought so hard to achieve was finally coming to an end, and his release was a celebration all across the world. Mandela emerged from prison as an incredible symbol of hope, reconciliation, and advocating for peaceful negotiations. In 1994, South Africa held its first democratic elections, with Mandela as the ANC's candidate for president. He won the election by a landslide, becoming South Africa's first black president and the country's signal of reconciliation, unity, and healing. After serving one term as president, Mandela stepped down in 1999, choosing not to seek re-election. He continued to be an advocate for peace, human rights, and social justice after he stepped down. Unfortunately, on December 5, 2013, Nelson Mandela passed away at the age of 95. On that day, South Africa, as well as the world, lost one of the kindest and most positive souls to ever walk the earth. A memorial service was held in that little village of Mezo, where his whole journey started. It feels crazy to think that someone so big started so small. To go so far and start from nothing is a true testament to his passion for others and his stubborn will. Although he is gone, Nelson Mandela's legacy lives on. Someone who dedicates their life solely to freeing others is someone who can never be forgotten. His whole identity was that of a selfless and passionate individual who would risk death to see a right turned wrong. Nelson Mandela's life was more than a turning point. He united a nation, a world, teaching people to see beyond their differences. Learning about Nelson Mandela has been an incredible journey for me. He has inspired me to live a purposeful life, driven by the unceasing desire to bring light into a world full of darkness.